Hello, and welcome to the Simply WoW podcast. I'm Meeps, and today I'm joined by Rise
Hey, how's it going?
and Jay.
What's up?
We're continuing where we left off last week with Shadowlands information and predictions. Because it's still in beta and specs especially are still being adjusted weekly, this is all speculation, but it's fun and it gives us a chance to make predictions of where everything will land.
Well, one of the things that's really key to point out there is we are still in beta, and it's really annoying because they made a bunch of changes these last couple weeks. Like last week, we did our podcast with our predictions for Shadowlands primarily because it was announced, and now we're seeing on things like Wowhead and on forums and for example, the Shaman Discord, shit's changing. Like there's dynamic class changes. There's nerfs. They tried to nerf one of the covenants based on one of the Mythic Plus dungeons, which I think is really interesting. There's been a bunch of GCD changes that are kind of seems like really too last minute. They're constantly changing stuff, so it's really unusual to talk about something and then suddenly have it change right in front of your eyes, especially this close to the actual game launch.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's crazy. I mean, we can expect pre-patch in just a few weeks because next month, Shadowlands.
That's weird to think about.
Right.
But speaking of those changes, we were talking about the Mythic Plus, how the Covenants affected Mythic Plus last week. And Rise, you brought it up. There's something about the Plaguefall dungeon.
Yeah, so one of the Covenants, I believe it was the Maldrax or Revendreth, whatever. That Covenant for the dungeon Plaguefall, there was a drop that you could get that would temporarily give you DR. By the way, the cameras went out on the stream.
Yep.
It would give you DR and it would give you damage for a small amount of time. It was I think it was 3 minutes. They nerfed it by I think it was 80%. It was oh, you get 25% damage reduction, you do 25% more damage. Now it's down to 5. So it's good to see that they're going back towards those changes that they had before. But man, still having a player choice give you that much power in a dungeon scenario, especially when it applies to Mythic Plus, is still a really scary thing to do. And I would really hope they just revert most of those changes. Because if they don't, it's going to cause some amount of problem in the community. But I mean, at least it's good to see that they're doing something. I don't think it's the only thing they need to do. They need to do a lot more. But it's a good step in the right direction.
Right. Yeah,
I
they
think
definitely.
a pretty good compromise would just be to remove Covenant power from Mythic Plus.
Yeah.
Period.
The first time you're doing a dungeon, or if you're doing a Mythic 0, 25%, sure, that might make your difference for your first Mythic run, but it's not gonna impact, a lot of the game. You're gonna do Mythic dungeons once a week. The content is gonna be old after a month. So just let us do it in normal heroic Mythic. Give us that advantage for while we're leveling and while the game starts, and then just disable it in Mythic Plus. That's what they should really do, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I just hope that it's not that impactful and the community doesn't get up in arms about it.
But they will. It's a community.
Oh yeah, they will. 100%, I agree.
In the wise words of one, I forget his name. There will be blood.
Yeah, something like that.
Can't remember the actor.
Very
He was in
wise
Gangs
man.
of New York.
Yeah.
But all right, so then speaking of Mythic Plus in particular, what do you guys think of the Mythic Plus cap, or not the target cap on AoE?
Jay, I know you've had a lot of slightly heated conversations with people in Discord, so I'll let you take this one first.
Okay, I have complicated thoughts, and it goes against the grain. I love it. But at the same time, I can understand why people don't. On one hand, Mythic Plus is a showcase for doing, best dungeons the fastest that you can, blah, 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 blah. I get that. And part of that means, bringing a Fire Mage and letting him kill everything for you and then collecting loot at the end. And while that's fun for the Fire Mage, and potentially the tank, there kind of is an issue with that because some classes get left out in high and dry. Currently in BFA, if you look at it, you rarely see enhancement shamans. You started to see shadow priests a little bit, but it was hunters, it was DHs, occasionally a rogue, and fire mage. And if you take a target cap and you put it in the game, it kind of allows those classes that don't do well in uber high group size, or not group sizes, but mob packs, For example, fire mages, their ignite spreads passively, so they do well in high cap. Shadow priest is the same thing. The more targets you have to dot, the more damage you're going to do, for the most part. When you take that away, it allows you to be able to bring a variety of different classes or whatever for whatever reason. So if you want to bring an enhancement shaman, they can. Now, granted, that's probably not why they did it. They probably did it because they watched MDI and went, oh, they're pulling 16 packs at once, nuking it down, and it's literally boss, one trash pull of 17 packs, boss, and repeat, and then the dungeon's over in 4 minutes, and they're like, oh. So maybe partly it has to do with the fact that they want their dungeon designers' work to actually be, played in a little bit more than 4 minutes a dungeon. I'm using hyperbole on purpose, but when it comes to the actual target cap, assuming that they don't completely fuck over like tanks, for example, if you have a 6-pack or an 8-pack and a tank has a target cap of 4, that's going to cause hell for, getting threat from a healer. Assuming they don't totally screw you over like that, and as far as I know, I'm pretty sure tanks don't have a target cap. If they keep it that way, totally on board. Tank can still keep threat on mostly everything. Like one keg smash and I should be able to take care of everything. The thing about the DPS is you then change your playstyle from I need to go in there with a nuke everything build into a priority target needs to die and the rest can kind of be cleaved style, which I think is more interesting because, you have more to do than just nuke an entire pack down in 10 seconds. And when you have like 10 targets and everybody has a cap of, let's say, 5, you really got to pick the most dangerous monster in that pack and work it down. And that allows other affixes like Grievous or Fortified, not Fortified, the one where they get the shields and they get stronger and stronger and stronger. It allows those affixes to actually be affixes as opposed to, the one that just buffs whenever something dies. That's just a joke. You pull 20 mobs together. If they all die at the same time, who cares if the last one gets a 20 stack if it dies at 0.1%?
Right.
So I'm in favor of it because it allows for a more interesting play style. And I think anybody that currently is backlashing against that and saying, no, there should be no target cap because it just is more interesting play style. Honestly, I think they're going to change their tune. Once they get used to the new style, they'll probably just be like, yeah, it's still fun. And it won't be an issue, or at least it won't be as nearly an issue as it is right now.
One of the things that I want to point out is since they're changing it so much, there are still classes that have the ability to do 5 or more targets. And I think that that's acceptable, but they have to make sure also that it's balanced. And the only thing I care about is that there isn't a class that's a supreme outlier. For example, if they just said, okay, screw it, every class can only hit 5 targets. Something like a Shadow Priest wouldn't feel as good unless they made Shadow Priests really good at 5 targets. So as long as it feels balanced, as long as, a Demon Hunter, if they can only hit 5 targets and a Shadow Priest can hit 10, as long as it's relatively similar in comparison to some degree, then I'd be understanding of it. Like, obviously, if you're playing a Shadow Priest, you have to have a lot more skill, maintaining all your dots, dotting every target, all that stuff, and they should be slightly rewarded. But it shouldn't be to the point where it breaks the game, and that shapes, like, the Mythic Plus meta, for example. Because if the Mythic Plus meta is you pull 20 mobs at a time, and you have to bring these classes that can only do it, and that's the way, then everyone's going to be tunnel vision to that mindset, and then that's going to make the game unfortunate. But as long as that is balanced to some maximum or degree to where it's not a problem, like it's not way over the top, I'm totally for it as well. I think that it's a healthy decision to keep some classes towards a certain niche, and it keeps other classes their niches as well. And it doesn't make certain classes go way over the top broken, like they have been in previous expansions, more so towards Mythic Plus and doing challenge modes and stuff like that. So as long as the numbers are tuned correctly, I'd be fine with them saying no one can hit over 5, or only these 3 classes, every class has one ability that can hit over 5. Even if they do something like that, I'm totally for it. The change is fun, but just don't break the game and make bad game design decisions to make certain classes just go way over the fucking top.
My question is, Sorry to interrupt there, Meeps.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that some classes go over the cap. Because I'm going Brew, and I'm currently playing a DPS, I'm trying to absorb as much information about Brew and all that stuff as I can right now. So my question is, and I haven't looked into the others, do you know which classes are not target capped? Because
It's
as
one.
far as I know, it's Shadow Priest.
No.
Go
Everything
ahead,
is everything is capped except for Kitty has one ability that isn't capped.
Like a swipe, for example.
I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, essentially.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it's
so, yeah, but
there's
there
a-
is no
there's-
target cap for like Affliction and Shadow Priest, for example. You just have to apply
Dot.
your dots, and
Right.
you know, by the time you dot the 17th thing, you know, the first 6 dots have already fallen off.
Right.
Like, not that obviously, but like Mindseer won't hit 20 targets.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so like
that
like
sounds
the
fine to me.
example the example for like an Ellie shaman is like my chain lightning is still only ever going to hit 5 targets like it always has been. But like my earthquake, when I drop my earthquake, it's now going to hit only 5 targets unless they change that. So, you know, I'm going to drop an earthquake and there might be 10 targets there, but it's only going to tick at 5 of them at a time to make it more balanced. Whereas in old content, you could pull a whole room, and as long as you have enough earthquakes down, an Ellie Shaman is doing insane amounts of damage. But yeah, like a Warlock, I believe, can still put out as many dots as they want.
Right.
I believe a Shadow Priest can still put out as many dots as they want, those kind of things. But there's just some abilities that are being scaled back to make it so that some of them aren't completely broken.
Well, in the case of like a Feral Druid, though, like the Feral Druid needs the uncap in order to stay like relevant in AoE, right, or in multi-target. Am I wrong on that?
Well, maybe. And really quick, I have a list. If you guys want me to go through the list really quick, just shotgun through it.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so I-Beam for Demon Hunters will now hit all targets. Fell Barrage is capped at 5 targets, so Demon Hunters will take a little hit. Frost Death Knights, Breath of Sindragosa hits all, but Frost Scythe only hits 5. Bursting Swords for DK can only hit 8 targets, so you can only burst 8 wounds. Death Decay and Scourge Strike can hit 5 targets. Epidemic and Blight remain uncapped. Feral Druid, Swipe, and Brutal Slash are capped at 5 targets. So if you swipe, you used to hit everything, but now you're only hitting up to 5. Even if you have 10 mobs pulled, only 5 are going to be hit by the damage, whereas Primal, Wrath, and Thrash are uncapped. Survival Hunters, Butchery, and Carve, 5 targets. Windwalker Monks, Fist of Fury, 5 targets. Spinning Crane Kit, 6 targets. Invoke Zuen, 4 targets. Whirling Dragon Punch is uncapped. So you're seeing like a trend where every class seems to have like one ability that's uncapped.
But the difference is, like, with Kitty, Primal Wrath is the big spamming AoE damage. Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's those that are being capped. It's the ones you can spam and do massive damage. Those are the ones being capped.
Well, Primal Wrath is uncapped.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Kitty's the only one that has its spammy that's left. Like, all the other ones, they're spamming. They still have cooldowns.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Correct. Yeah. Retribution Paladin, Divine Storm will hit up to 5 targets. Wake of Ashes and Consecration remain uncapped. Fan of Knives for Assassination hits 8. Poison Bomb is uncapped. Outlaw Rogues, Blade Flurry will only hit 4. Shuriken Storm and Vault will hit 8 for Subtlety. Enhancement Shaman, Chain Lightning hits 3. Crash Lightning hits half of the... Wait. Has half square rooted. Okay, it says that it's uncapped, but it's really weird wording. Fire Nova hits 6, Hailstorm hits 6. For Arms Warriors, Blade Storm Ravage hit 8, Whirlwind hits 4. Blade Storm hits 8, Whirlwind hits 4, and Dragon Roars unchanged for Fury. And that's all of the melee DPS. So you can kind of get the idea. I can bleed into the ranged ones if you guys want as well. But it seems like every class has like one ability, whether it's spammy or not, that maintains that kind of, oh, I can hit everything playstyle. But the interesting thing is that like they're doing these cap tunings, and you can look at, you know, like a class like Fury Warrior and think, wow, you know, as I was a Fury Warrior in Mythic Plus and doing speed runs, we could pull the whole room and I could Blade Storm and melt everything. Now if you pull 20 targets, your Blade Storm's going to hit 8 targets at a time, so you might hit mobs 1 through 8 on the first tick of Blade Storm, and then the next tick of Blade Storm you might hit targets 9 through 16, and so your damage is going to be really spread. It's not going to make your damage look like lower because you're still doing the damage, but it's going to decrease the maximum potential if you're doing something insane. So for most cases, it doesn't even make a difference.
Right. I think.
Go ahead, sorry, Meeps. I'll let you.
I think we'll see a meta change Maybe not at the MDI level, but I think overall we'll see a meta change the way that Blizzard seems to intend it, and we'll either see the dot classes really shine, just come out of the woodwork because they can, they have their uncapped AoE by dotting everything, or we will see pulls highly moderated. Like, we'll just see pulls of 5 to 6 mobs throughout the entirety of the expansion.
Mm-hmm. That's what I have a feeling will happen as well.
That's actually what I was actually going to hit on, so I'm glad that you said that, and that you went before I did. I don't know if that's going to be the case. Obviously, when we start going for gearing up and whatnot, like, I'm going to pull, as safe as I can, but if I can pull 2 trash packs at once, even if it's above everybody's cap, I'm going to do it. Because, there's going to be a priority target, then it needs to die. The rest can all get cleaved down, and I'll just keep moving as, the pack goes. And honestly, if it works the way that I'm thinking that it might work, I'll probably just end up chain pulling the whole dungeon as long as mana can be kept up from the healer. Because I think it's definitely going to change the play style of not pulling 16 packs at once, but I don't think it's going to be like, pull 1 pack, kill it, okay, pull next pack. I think it's going to be faster chain pulls, just not all at once. You might take 2 or 3 packs at once, and then once it's half dead or mostly dead, then the tank will grab the next stack of monsters. I think it'll be like that. Less than the opposite.
Yeah, I can see that happening. It'll be really interesting to see whether or not, more specifically, like, if Mythic Dungeon teams, like MDI teams, do that. Because again, it'll have the trickle-down effect. It'd be really interesting to see them pull exactly 5 mobs at a time. And then that maybe people would look and be like, wow, okay, well, if they have to do that, then, the meta totally shifts, where, the class necessarily doesn't matter. And then maybe at the end of the expansion, when we have so much borrowed power that it doesn't fucking matter, all of a sudden that meta changes. So we'll see how it shifts, but I could definitely see a world where that happens.
Right.
In a world where Shadow Priest and Affliction Warlock rule in the Mythic Plus. Totally unlike now.
Mm-hmm. It could happen. I hope it doesn't. That's one of the reasons why I really like the target cap, is because it's going to force teams to bring other classes, or at least not definitely bring them, open their mind to it, which I think is probably the best thing that can happen for casual competitive Mythic Plus, if that's a thing. I don't mean MDI teams. I mean people that just want to push keys. People like myself who just want to go push keys, have fun with their friends, and not worry about, like, what does MDI do? Like, I need to have the perfect comp. If I'm not playing the perfect comp, then, I'm wasting my fucking time and all that shit, right?
Yeah.
So.
Speaking. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, just to summarize, I think it's a good change. We're going to find out if it is or not. Obviously, it could shake out to be terrible. Who knows? So I reserve my right to change my mind. But
well, it seems like Blizzard's reserving their right to change their mind every week.
Might too.
Yeah.
I'm expecting that. We hear a lot about pull the ripcord right now. Like, there's so much that could just whoosh change in 1 week. Like, every week they're still doing some pretty major class and spec changes.
That is
I really hope they don't pull the ripcord as people are complaining about. I think that would be a huge mistake. Like, let it breathe. Like, we haven't even had any amount of play with it. Let's chill.
Yeah, don't give it to 2% of players and assume that the entire community is instantly going to hate it. Yeah, that philosophy doesn't work for everything. But when it's such a big issue like this, where it really could, in my opinion, go either way based on how they present their information, how they balance it, like, just give it to us for a week. And if it's really bad before Mythic, the raid tier comes out, or before normal, heroic, whatever, a couple weeks, pull the ripcord if it's really that bad. If it's really that much of an issue. But just let it ferment for like a week. Let people think about it. Let people see it. Let people make their own decisions when it's real content and not hypothetical stuff that just changes every week.
Yeah.
Which I think,
let it breathe.
On that topic, I think this is a pretty good segue to talk about What some people might think is a big issue, but I think we'll try to keep more down on the wraps, is covenants. Because that's a fairly big proprietor of that kind of idea and concept of just like pull the ripcord, just let us do whatever we want with them. And for those that don't know, the covenant system right now looks really concerning for a lot of players.
Yeah. That's one of the things that that's one of the things that's changing every week and is completely, especially, okay, so there's multiple layers to covenants. A lot of people know about, we got you the big four, Kyrian, Necrolord, Night Fae, and Venthyr. And a lot of people know about what each of them brings, like Venthyr's teleport, or Kyrian, or Night Fae's Fox, and then whatever class that you might be looking at, the different specs, what they get along with that, typically mobility, utility bonus. But I think the thing that people aren't paying attention to and will actually be more impactful to player power is the soul binds and conduits.
I 100% agree. And for those that don't know, you pick your covenant, and inside your covenant you get 3 smaller options in which soulbind you want. It's like a player character that you get to interact with, and you can do special stuff. Each one of them has their own skill tree. And so when you're looking at it at face value, like, oh, I want to pick Venthyr because it offers, for example, for Elemental Shaman, it gives me like a really cool chain lightning that's on a cooldown that's like all bloody and stuff, and then I get a teleport. But what people don't realize is that when I make that decision, I also have to choose which soulbind of those 3 is the best. And then off of which one is the best, I have to look at all the different possibilities from this giant skill tree that we're getting, and then input conduits into them to get the options that I want. And it turns into, oh, here's a little player choice where you get some cosmetics and you get to align yourself with a faction, which seems kind of cool, into it is a mess for character power. And it is really frightening to have to look at not 4 options at face value, but 14 or not 14, 12 different options when you're just thinking about just the soul binds. And then it goes deeper than that when you're looking at the soulbind trees. If there's 2 that are close, well, then you have to make more decisions based on what conduits you can slot into them. So it goes from 4 decisions to 12 decisions to, an outrageous amount of player choice that has to be made if you want to be, quote unquote, the best you can be. Obviously, there's going to be some that debatably can be used for different things, but if you're someone that's sitting there and just like, I need the most damage, I don't think people have an exact lock, and they're not going to have an exact lock on what's going to be the best at any one given point. And that's really frustrating to have this like really cool choice that you feel like you're making, only to really and truly realize that, man, there is a lot more nuance to this choice. It is a scary choice for high tier raiders that really want to be the best they can be before stepping into a raid or a Mythic Plus, anything like that.
And do you guys remember how out of whack how powerful the essences were on PTR before they actually launched? I mean, they're still really out of whack and powerful, but over time the math was done. These are the essences for this spec. These are the essences for this spec.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
so,
I wasn't playing when they came out. I came back
right.
at Reddit 8.3. So I came into back to BFA after Old Year. So that's the last time I played. I came back into a world where all of a sudden there's essences, and I was like shit for a while, and then everyone's like, dude, get your essences. I'm like, what the hell are essences? So yeah.
That's a Ridley.
To make an interesting to make an interesting comparison to like that essence system, when essences came out, they were fine. But if you were ever coming back to the game, then it felt like a chore, which is another thing to consider thinking about all of these different factions that you're going to choose from. Because if you're a character that starts week 1, day 1, you might get more advantages, and there might be time gates related to those. And another thing that's interesting to think about that's even makes the topic of how they have borrowed power inside of them even worse is that, when essences came out, you might have one that simulates on a DPS for really high. And then a couple months later, when you have a new stat weight or a new raid comes out and you get more, new corruptions or new Azerite gear, that all of a sudden you realize, hey, if I change my build around, I can run these essences instead and milk out extra damage. And if that's what happens with the conduit system inside the Covenants, it's going to be a mess. It's just going to be a fucking nightmare.
And you can
So all of a
only
sudden, yeah.
and you're locked to your covenant each week, and it's a hefty cost. I think they've been saying to change from one covenant to another. We don't know the exact details on how it's done yet, but you're locked to your covenant for a week. So if you covenant switch and then Tuesday comes around and they're like, all right, well, we're changing this conduit because it's way out of whack. Well, now it just got nerfed into the ground, and the old covenant that you just left is now the number one again. So from a Mythic raid standpoint, it is brutal.
Well, you know, even different than that, and just at a basic level. If you're farming Mythic Plus, you're probably going to want AoE, right? Well, if you choose an AoE related, choice for your soulbind and your conduits, and all of a sudden you go to Mythic Raid and it's every single fight is Patchwork single target, and you want to change to milk out more damage, then you're going to have to change. But then what do you do next week? Do you go back because you want to farm Mythic Plus on a push week and you change? Or do you stick with that for Raid? Are you worse in Raid? Are you worse in Mythic Plus? Like, I hope that it won't make that much of a difference. But to a top-end Raider, that's a big question. Do I step into an AoE fight with, the implication that I have my AoE conduit and all my AoE soulbind and all my AoE conduits, or do I just go in there with my single target and probably perform worse and potentially lose my raid spot if I'm not performing well enough? Like, that's a really scary balancing issue that comes into play for those kind of people.
Right. I think that
mitigated.
That is somewhat mitigated by the fact that you've got 3 soulbinds that you can switch between.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think the soulbinds will definitely help in that regard because they'll give you those options, but there's certain things that your covenant just gives you that is perhaps going to be better in certain situations. So my choice for my covenant is going to be Night Fae, unfortunately, because Brewmaster totally needs more movement, right? It appears to be lagging a little bit, Gilfy.
Reload.
Okay. F5. Yeah, so while Brewmaster totally needs more movement, and that's why I'm going Night Fae. I'd be going Night Fae because, the people that I'm probably going to be running a ton of Mythic Plus with don't have a Night Fae yet, and you need one of every fucking thing, otherwise, you can't be competitive. And then on the other side of that, the one thing that's really cool that I found about Night Fae is the offensive power for it is going to be great for Mythic Plus. Just the ability to do that Feline Stomp is a ton of damage, and it ignites all your targets with, the fire from Brew. But that's not going to be good on a Patchwork or a Butcher or a Ursoc or something like that, right? Like, that's going to be terrible on a one-target raid encounter. So, obviously I can't switch that. That's my covenant ability. Like,
right.
Conduits are going to be able to change certain things, but not that. So that part, I think, is the thing that most people are a little bit upset about, is the fact that if you go Night Fae because of Mythic Plus, like, you're not going to be ideal in Raid because, maybe you wanted to go Necrolord for the... what do you call it? The bone shield thing. It's useless. Don't do that. Or let's say
don't listen to him. It's not useless. It has its place.
It has its place. It absolutely does have its place. As far as Brew goes, though, it is not as good as the other two options. So, like Kyrian, though, the just cleanse that you just get is going to be awesome, especially for probably a Patchwork fight where, you might get hit with a bleed, or you might get hit with something that you can just... it's off. The Feline Stomp's not going to be better for that. You'll get damage out of it, but that's it. So I think that's where the issue is with people when they get hung up on that. I think it's that, not the others.
You know what's going to be a really funny thing? I wonder if this will affect the World First race. Because, that's a perfect example of, like, oh, well, if I can get a cleanse, let's say, the penultimate boss, or, the ultimate boss of the raid, if it has some kind of crazy dot, imagine all of a sudden a no-name guild comes out of nowhere and kills it, and everyone's like, how'd you do that? And they're like, oh, well, our tanks just ran this thing, and it mitigated the tank mechanic, and we just made it that much easier. Like that could affect, from a progression standpoint, what guilds do. And then what would a guild feel like they need to do? They're going to need to feel like to either roll a different character and get that, covenant, or have someone's like alt that they have roll that, and then all of a sudden they're tanking now or something like that. But I really hope that kind of stuff doesn't happen for the sake of the game as a whole, because that seems a little bit compromising.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what Blizzard has been, what they say they've been trying to fight with degenerate gameplay. That's degenerate gameplay at its most.
Yeah, and that's something that they haven't decided to change, or at least publicly say that they're seriously, considering just pulling that ripcord. I don't want to use that term, and obviously, again, they could let it sit for a while, but yeah, some that
If they're
Otter
gonna
mentioned,
pull the
like,
ripcord, I think the best time to do it. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to get this why I thought.
No, go ahead.
The best time to pull the ripcord, if they're gonna do it, is after the first tier.
Probably,
Let it breathe for a while. You'll know if the experiment failed after the first raid tier.
That's the thing about Blizzard that I don't like. I appreciate the experimentation, which they have seemed to do for the past 4 expansions, is serious
For
experimentation.
the whole expansion.
Yeah. Especially BFA has been all experimentation, and I appreciate that to some degree. But at some point, you need to stop experimenting and be like, all right, well, this part of this system worked. Let's bring that forward and iterate on it.
Yeah, definitely should. Funny tangent, Otter in the chat was mentioning, like, imagine, like, having a world first class raiding guild, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm the tank. I have 3 Brewmaster monks, 1 for each of the covenants that might be more viable, so if we have a fight that we need to cheese with Night Fae, I'll just bring the Night Fae one in. Oh, that would be so awful if they ended up doing something like that.
Do I have to roll 3 monks?
That doesn't sound uncommon for the world first guilds.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know that they're a totally different breed of character, a totally a higher echelon of play. But like just that concept of like feeling like, oh, well, a mythic first guild did this, so what are people going to do? They're going to try to emanate what they're doing. But if, for example, every single fight, their tank is switching between multiple tanks, and like one kill they do this covenant, and another kill they do that covenant, like it's going to seem really, really weird. People aren't going to know what to choose.
Yeah.
I think as long as... Okay, so I think as long as people don't feel forced to roll alts of the same class in order to cover a covenant thing, I think it'll ultimately be fine. The world first guilds are going to do that anyways. They're always going to, because, like if Kyrian is just so much better on one boss than Night Fae, they're not going to run Night Fae on that because they're going to want to get the world first. So, they'll have to do that. For everybody else, I don't think that's going to be the case, unless covenants are kind of broken or segregated, I guess, in power to the level that everybody is speculating that they're going to get. I don't think it'll get that far, but that might be kind of the MO that people are hypothesizing that they might do.
Do you remember the first patch of BFA and Azerite armor?
Oh man,
I don't want to talk about it.
Like that's what we're looking at right now. Like,
I hope not.
I'll mention it really quick from my perspective. I went into BFA with a 110 character boost from the pre-order, and I was like, what do I want to use this boost on? And I had the thought, you know what? This Azerite gear thing sounds so fucking terrible that I'm going to make another shaman, play both of them equally in the first 2 weeks, and whichever one has the better Azerite gear would then go to raid. Turns out my normal character that I picked anyway went to raid because it was better. But like having that feeling and then looking at all this covenant, nonsense and thinking, I can't change this. This is permanent. If I make the wrong choice, am I rolling a new character? Am I totally screwed? That's a really big thing to think about for some people. Not everyone. Some people are just going to pick what looks cool or what they think sounds cool, and that'll be that. But there's going to be a small percentage of players that are going to look at it and just be like, oh shit, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
Right. So I just want to make the point because some people are like, no, there's no way. It'll be like 5% between different soul binds.
Oh no.
And just to explain, the soul bind is, you know, the 3 different people with each covenant. It's their talent tree essentially. It's basically you get another talent tree, and then conduits are the items that you farm up in the world, or by doing raids or whatever, that you socket into these talent trees into different positions, be it potency, basically utility, defense, or offense. Some of these people have looked up. Some of these will triple your damage. Like from one conduit from one soulbind to another, it will triple your. Some of them will triple single target damage. Triple. We're not talking 10, 20, even 30%. We're talking a tripling of damage from one to another. Right now, the numbers are completely skewed. I don't think they will be completely in line in a month.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that when you want to do a flavor thing, they're never going to be balanced. But, you know, people have found out that, like, on a single target, like, an ability might hit for, like, 5,000 damage. But then another Covenant's ability is going to hit for, 6,000 damage. And all of a sudden, people realize that, well, if I'm just looking at raw numerical value, they do the same thing. They have the same cooldown, the same functionality. One of them just has an extra, 10%? No, 20% damage increase. So it's literally 20% better to pick a Covenant. It's astronomically astounding that they put the system in place and then don't make them similar, or don't make them feel niche, but they still are relatively the same numerically. The fact that you can have a Covenant that does 20% more is just incredible. It's just absolutely insane to me.
And so a lot of the speculation at first was people were going to be picking their Covenants. If you're a Mythic Plus player, then you're going to be picking your Covenants based on the dungeons that you do. If you aren't a Mythic Plus, you do other things, your world content or your raider, or you do everything, then you're going to look at an overall, which is the best Covenant ability, and pick that. But more and more, I think that once people get in there and experience the different Covenants and what they bring, I think it'll be the soul binds. The power from the soul binds right now is the reason to pick your Covenant. Because it's just so skewed at the moment.
Well, yeah, to peter off onto a topic that we'll talk about a little bit later, but something to bring up is, this isn't the only system of borrowed power, technically speaking. There's also going to be things like legendaries. And who knows that there's going to be a theory crafter out there that looks at a legendary and says, wow, this legendary will work really well with this Covenant's specific conduit in this soulbind, and then it's going to get out of hand, man. Like, some people are going to find some crazy shit and probably break the game, and Blizzard will probably patch it eventually, like they have with other things that totally skew the system. But, there's a lot of possibilities to consider. It's not just, Venthyr is 5% better than Night Fae. It's Venthyr is 25% better than Night Fae if you're using this specific conduit with this legendary, and then that kind of min-maxing makes it very difficult for the average player to keep up and feel like they're being competitive, and then, not feel like they're being shoehorned into a single thing, because that's what people are going to do. They're going to find the best thing, and everyone's going to say, this is the best by X%, and then everyone's going to do it. So it's going to be a total nightmare.
Yeah. Which is actually, I think it's had the intended effect on me that Blizzard is going for, to push people like us into just go with whatever sounds fun, play what you want to play. Because eventually, like, this is a moving target. Every week, I think from release, every week they're going to be doing nerfs and buffs to everything. The classes themselves, the conduits, the soulbinds, I think they're just going to be leveled out every week. And so you're going to have people that are jumping week to week to whatever is the hot shit at the moment. But I think I'm just going to, once I finally decide which character I'm going to play, I'm going to decide on the Covenant. I'm just going to stick it out, at least until Raid. If day one of Raid opens up and there's just clearly one that's above the others in terms of, like, this is what you got to raid with. It's just nothing has the kind of potential this does. That's the only thing that's going to get me to switch Covenants.
Well, I'm going to be really curious if hypothetically day one, if there's a way to look at and simulate or look at and theorize, or just even as long as you can see all of the available information for every single soul bind, and then look at all of their little things they have and see what I can slot in as far as conduits go. If you're able to see that all day one, I think a lot of people can make an educated guess of what they might think is the best. But if they don't allow you to do that, or if the testing from player to player basis is limited, that's when I'm going to be more concerned. And I might even get my character to level 60 and then switch to an alt and start leveling an alt and wait a couple hours, wait a day, and try to look at information and say, okay, well now which is the best choice for Mythic Plus or for Raid or whatever, and I want to make that decision. Because if I go in there on the first day and the information isn't present for myself and other people to see, that decision, people might make the wrong one as far as, depending on what they're looking for. So that's also something to consider, at least something that I'm going to be considering for myself.
Jay, what about you? What are your thoughts? Personally, like, how are you thinking you're going to go about it?
I think I'm in a little bit different of a situation of specifically than you are, Meeps, because with you, your focus is 100% the raid. You do not care about Mythic Plus. For you, it's a means to an end. Like, you got to do Mythic Plus to get gear for raid, and that's why you're going to do it. Aside from that, you're going to do your 1 a week minimum, for the raid requirement for the guild, and that's about it.
I'll do a couple extra if the guildies need it. If the guildies need a body.
Yeah, to like help people out or whatever. Because that's kind of how you are.
But what about the Great Vault Meeps? Aren't you going to do 10 Mythic Plus a week to try to get your 3 options?
You're actually right. I'm going to be doing that at the beginning of the expansion. And then also I want the mount from getting the Conqueror Season 1.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what I was going to say is aside from the vault, I love keys. So I'm going to be doing tons of keys. That's my plan. I want to be pushing high keys as fast as possible, as many as possible, and yada yada. Of the people that I'm going to be running with, I mean, I don't have a set group, but of all the people that have talked to me about wanting to push keys, nobody has said, I'm going Night Fae. So in order to fill that spread, unless they pull the ripcord or unless they take power away from Covenants in Mythic Plus, I kind of have to go Night Fae, which is fine because really the choice for me was between Kyrian and Night Fae anyways, and I was kind of teetering on the edge of either of them, and that's unless Necrolord gets changed or buffed, because currently it's good. I would say B tier, while Kyrian and Night Fae are both A tier.
Isn't also
it's still not a bad choice. What's that?
Isn't also bugged to hell right now?
Yeah,
I think it might be, but I obviously don't have beta access, so I can't actually say. I've heard that. Yes.
All right, I have a. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So for me, I'm going Night Fae because the people that I'm going to be playing with all need a Night Fae, and because honestly, it seems the most fun to me as a thing for my class. It's the most interactive. I love the idea of Phaeline Stomp, where as long as I'm standing in the Phaeline, I hit an ability. I think they nerfed it to 6% chance to completely reset the timer. Or the cooldown, the minute-long cooldown. They could just poof, I got it up again. Like, that is so cool to me. So I'm going to be choosing that.
Viagra.
Purely because of, well, not purely because of Mythic Plus, but mostly because of Mythic Plus. It's still going to be useful in Raid, picking up ads and stuff like that. Or just added damage, which, let's be honest, Monk almost always has been the lowest DPS tank. So the damage might have been something that they needed, but I don't think it was. But it's nice.
I can't wait to see the random 100 percentile Brewmaster parse words. Do you look at their abilities cast and it's Phaeline Stomp, Phaeline Stomp, Phaeline Stomp, Phaeline Stomp.
80% damage is Phaeline Stomp.
It's going to happen. Someone's going to get crazy resets and it's going to pop off.
I'm in.
So I have to kind of get away from the topic or to kind of end this topic of covenants and stuff, because it's hard to say because everything's probably going to change in the next 2 months here. But how would you guys feel if they made all of the benefits for covenants only world content related? No dungeons, no raids. If you were a covenant, you don't get bonus in dungeons. How would you feel if it did not affect what I would consider is the high tier gameplay? Do you guys think that would be a bad thing or a good thing, and why?
I would love it. I've actually been wanting world content buffs. Like we get them every now and then, but
Like from Draenor.
yeah, yeah. Like I'd be so okay with like you're just a superhuman at the end of the expansion out in the world because of all the buffs that you've gathered over the course of the expansion, and then the borrow power. I'd be okay with a bit of borrow power like legendaries. Legendaries can work in a raid setting or in an instance setting. That'd be fine, but like since we've got so many different systems of borrowed power, I would love it if it just worked out in the world.
What about you, Jay?
Complicated thoughts. I think for Mythic Plus, absolutely no power associated with the Covenant. Combined with the fact that, you know, the whole Night Fae get to skip a little bit in the Night Fae dungeon, like take that out. In Mythic Plus, take that out. Normal Mythic dungeons, sure, keep it in. It's nice flavor. Nobody runs Mythics after week 2 anyways. So, but Mythic Plus, that's kind of competitive. You know, you want people to be able to be competitive in that regard, then let them do that. Mythic Raid is kind of where it gets a little bit muddy for me because I want to say, despite the fact that I don't want power associated with the Covenants, I also at the same side want to be able to use it in Raid. But that's only because I'm not like a top tier world raider where I'd feel forced to go a certain Covenant. I can honestly say that I will probably. I don't want to say definite. I don't want to say speak in an absolute because Meeps would meme. But I will probably never tell one of our raiders, "Hey, you need to switch Covenants." So, because we're not that level of rating. I would understand if somebody in Limit had to switch Covenants because of it for a boss fight, but I don't think we'll ever do that. So for me, non-issue, kind of a for raid, But for Mythic Plus, absolutely can't have power associated to it. Then you're absolutely pigeonholed.
Oh yeah, I think I'm kind of on the same table as Meeps here. I think it would be so cool to finish the storyline and then be like, you have this choice. It's an awesome choice. It'll help you with all of your world questing for the rest of the expansion. It'll help you out, you know, killing world bosses. It'll make you feel super strong. You know, if you want to go farm, you know, a rare mob, it'll make you cool, and you can get an ability, and you can carry that ability from zone to zone. So you can be the Kyrian that is going over to the Necrolord area, and you can be doing Kyrian like related abilities and stuff over there. I think that would be cool flavor. But if it's really not balanced, I would love it if it was only linked to, for example, non-war mode world questing, open world stuff. Because if you bring that into PvP, there's going to be a scenario where there's going to be like a top world player in arenas that's like, oh yeah, you have to run this covenant because, you know, for like example, like a shaman, like some people were saying for PvP, shaman doesn't have good defensives. So the solution is to run the Necrolord one and get the big shield, where, you know, that's not optimal for everyone, and that's probably not optimal for Raider. People might actually do that, and they might just sit in PvP with their Resto shaman or their Ellie shaman that gets an extra bonus defensive, and that'll pigeonhole people. But if you took all of that away and all of the bonuses away, PvP would still be at the same point, and then they would just balance PvP around all the different classes. If they did that for Mythic Raid, it wouldn't be, oh, our tanks had this ability and they shrugged off a dot, that was really important, or, oh yeah, we just told all of our raiders to pick Venthyr and this ability comes out and we just teleport away and it just is irrelevant. Like, those things will happen, but if they're not associated with the hard content, or more specifically, I guess I would think is like the content that they're trying to do an esport for, then it would open up the game a lot more to all players of all different skill levels, to be able to make those players feel like, wow, I can copy those MDI players and do their dungeon routes, and I don't feel pigeonholed because I didn't choose Night Fae and we can't do the skip if that's the MDI route. Or, oh, wow, in Mythic Raid, you know, I can't 100% parse because I chose, you know, Maldraxxus instead of Necrolord for whatever my class is. All of those things suck, so it'd be cool if you just made this really cool choice. It made you super powerful out in the world, content that matters to some people, not to the highest echelon of players, and then just disabled those things. If I walk into, you know, a Mythic Plus scenario, it's disabled. If I walk into a Mythic Zero, sure, have the power. If you walk into a raid, any difficulty of raid, take it away. That way it's more balanced for everyone, instead of I made the wrong choice and now I have to suffer until either I can change it on a week by week basis, or until Blizzard pulls a ripcord and I can fully, I would say reset my character as a sort of harsh wording for that.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of fair.
I don't think it's gonna. Go ahead.
I'd want it on in war mode. I could just imagine the server just collapsing whenever there's 20 or 40 Horde superheroes versus 40 Alliance superheroes duking it out and in the zone. Just the server melting down.
And they're all teleporting
that won't
around.
be a problem.
Right.
They're teleporting around with
wouldn't
cool
have an
blood
issue.
effects, and they're throwing Kyrian spears at each other, and yeah, it would be a mess.
Yep.
That won't be an issue. Come on now.
Ruin
if Blizzard with their amount of money that they've got invested into this game, I don't see anything like that ever becoming a problem.
No.
They're usually very quick to fix bugs and any unintentional consequences like that. Borrowed power has never been an issue. For those that can't pick up sarcasm, I'm being extremely sarcastic.
Najatar works fine every time.
Ruin, if you can hear this, get the fuck out of Najatar.
Yeah,
don't
I
want
just
you
want to
there.
do dailies, all right?
I want to have fun and experience the game. I don't want a 40-man Alliance team to just kill me every single time I spawn in.
Or even if they don't kill me, they're just shutting down the server. Like, 10 seconds went by, I can move again.
Yeah, right.
On a joking note, thanks, Asmongold.
Right.
Okay, well, so, enough about the conduits. I guess let's talk about something that we touched on a little bit, but I think this is actually a really good discussion because a lot of people have brought this up to us in different forms. But when we're thinking about like raid scenario, obviously we've kind of mentioned that like there might be good choices in raids as far as Covenant and stuff like that goes. But we've also had a lot of people bring up like, okay, well, what should I play for raid, or what should I do in a raid, or is my class going to be worth it in raid? Like I guess one of the basic things is we had one of our guildmates say, oh, I'm thinking about playing Survival Hunter, and some people laughed, and I sat there and I was like, well, why do you want to play it? It's fun. Okay, I'm totally fine with that choice, but the question arose like, why aren't you playing something else? Why don't you, choose this other thing? Yeah, well, it's. I guess for me, it's at the end of the day, we're gonna bring the players. We're not necessarily going to worry too much about the class. Obviously, for like a world pushing content mythic raid team, you do have to worry about composition, and especially if you want a mythic raid, you have to worry about composition. But there's a certain amount of raid spots that need to be filled by a couple useful roles. But then past that, you can bring whatever you want. The one concern that I would have for something like a Survival Hunter or some people that want to play unorthodox classes is you just have to be careful about their balance. Yeah, a Feral Druid or something that we've only seen one of recently, a Balanced Druid. If you're bringing those like classes that some people might say are obscure, Elish Shaman, Enhancement Shaman, especially in current tier, you have to make sure that at least you can perform and bring something to the table, whether it's just raw damage or good mechanics. But a lot of people have been talking about that kind of concept of like what is good to bring in a raid, what's like a balanced composition, and then also I guess what are we thinking about doing at Shadowlands for that kind of content.
And
it's a lot to talk about.
Right. And to begin with, we should probably break it down with like what comp we're looking at for Shadowlands raid, and basically because of how they've changed the buffs that each class brings. Right now, there are 11 different. There's a reason to bring one of the 11 different classes. Rogue is the exception. They don't bring anything raid wide.
Well, they have a.
I know they bring.
Well, yeah, raid wide. Raid wide. Yes, you're
right.
correct.
They're the only class that doesn't bring something raid wide. Everything else either has battle res, which is DK warlocks and druids, or they have lust, which is hunters, mages, and shamans. The demon hunters bring 5% debuff, monks bring 5% debuff, warriors bring 5% attack power, mages int, priests fort. So basically we're to have a, what's the word I'm looking for here, a balanced, to have the minimal amount of buffs. We've got 11 spots that need filled right out the gate. Out of the 20-man raid, we need one of, well, I guess not 11 because like 3 different classes bring the battle res, so we only need one of those 3, or 3 different ones bring the lust, which we only need one of them. So we're looking at 7 or 8 spots that are filled. Like we need one of each of those classes.
Yeah, which is also really weird to think about. And for the sake of the argument, you can compare that to what some guilds do. Like I guess the example of recently was Limit. Recently, Limit came out and said, "Hey, for the world first progression raid, we're gonna bring I think it was 9 warlocks." And I'm sitting there like, "Holy mackerel, that's a lot of class stacking." But if that's what they think they need to do, they can do it. And when you think about that comp, the other 7 buffs that you need, either they're going to have 9 warlocks and they're going to make their raid perfect with every single one of those buffs, or they're going to exclude them, and that'll be a slight hole in their composition. But a top guild will probably work through it. But for your average guild, it's really, really helpful to have at least one of all of those things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're going 9 warlocks, then you don't need the physical damage debuff, so you don't need the monk.
Yeah.
But you need a demon hunter because it brings the magical damage debuff.
Yeah.
I think. Okay, so there's certain classes that obviously you want to have one of because they're going to bring a certain thing. When we're talking about comp, this is where it gets a little bit messy because somebody might say I want to play Windwalker, and it's like, okay, cool. Look at what Windwalker brings to the raid. Okay, they get the physical debuff for the boss or whatever, right? That 5%, similar to how DHs do. But they don't think about tank comp. If you have a Brewmaster, you don't need a Windwalker. So that Windwalker just became useless, which means that spot is better for a Paladin or a Warrior. A Warrior's going to give you, Rallying Shout, or whatever it's called, Rallying Cry. That, you can stack 6 of them and pop them all at the same time, whatever, or separately, or whatever. That's a raid cooldown. It's, contrary to what some people might believe, not a personal cooldown. But it is a raid cooldown. Love you, Nate. But
that's one thing I was gonna bring up is it's compounded by the issue that you're bringing up now. Is you start with the basic comp of we need these buffs. These are the ones they're in. Then you get to the raid wide utility, which I'll let you continue on with.
Yeah. So it gets even more muddled the more that you think about it because of the fact that XYZ class, whatever it is. Let's use Windwalker as the example. So you don't need a Windwalker if you have a brew. So you can that Windwalker is useless. You might as well bring a Ret Pally or a Warrior. The problem just compounds itself like that. Why would you bring a DPS priest if you have a healing priest? So that frees up the more slots for other classes, and specifically, in terms of a survival hunter. A survival hunter doesn't bring you anything to the raid. Yeah, sure, they have an immunity in the fact of turtle, so yeah, that's good. They can help soak a mechanic or whatever, but they're still taking up valuable real estate in the raid for a melee class. And specifically with regards to ranged versus melee, historically you always want more range than melee. I would wager to say 5 to 6 melee and 8 to 9 ranged is your comp. Most comps. Obviously, unless you get to Uldir and second to last boss, rogues are redonkulous, you want to stack 7 rogues, yeah, okay, that's one thing, situationally where it can change. But it gets really muddled with Blizzard, and this is why I think every class should have some sort of raid utility. And I don't mean personal utility, because if you look at the survival, for example, like I said, they get misdirect, which is cool, but very situationally useful. Very situationally useful. Generally, unless you're running currently, in current BFA, misdirect's not really needed, except for when you've got to kill a certain target very, very quickly, and you've got a tank that can't get threat issues because of how much corruption the rest of the raid has, so they're just doing way more threat in comparison to the tank. That's the only time where I would be like, maybe. But with the what do you call it? Survival hunter. That's the reason for misdirect. The immunity, a Ret Paladin has that too, but the Ret Paladin can also give a blessing to your healers or whatever. So you can run 4 Ret Pallies instead of 1 Ret Pally, a survival hunter, and an enhancement shaman, for example. Because the enhancement shaman, I honestly think Wind Fury is not going to be as big a deal as maybe it initially looked like. It's going to be nice, but it's only going to really work on white hits, so It's not going to be that bad, or it's not going to be that good. So what's the point in bringing survivals? Why not just stack rets if you're going to have any melee? I mean,
Well, the one thing to also consider
tricky.
that is that you are right in that, stacking rets would technically give you more raid utility. Like, for example, like in comparison, just straight up comparison to a ret to a survival. They both have an immunity, and monk or the hunter has a misdirect. Sure, that can be good in fringe situations, but the ret paladin can self heal much better, can even heal other people in like very fringe scenarios. They bring freedom, they bring a raid wide aura because they're getting auras back. They also bring blessing of kings or blessing of wisdom for a healer or a tank or someone that's taking a lot of damage, and they're usually pretty good damage. The one factor would be is that if, say, for example, and I know it's not that way currently, but if Survival Hunter was like a mile ahead of other DPSs, similar to how the Fire Mages are currently shaping up right now on in Nyalotha, like a Fire Mage, you bring it just because it has so much damage. People stack them because they just do incredible amounts of damage and they're unstoppable.
But on top of
So-
that, they also have an immunity.
Yeah, they also have an
True.
immunity. So that brings even more to the table. But I would say, when you're looking at those classes, like, say, like, a Ret and a Survival Hunter did the exact same amount of damage. Well, at that point, if you really need a misdirect, you'd probably take a Hunter. But also, other Hunters can fill that role. If you need, other things like healing, or if you need auras, or if you need blessings or whatever, then you bring the Ret. And if they were exactly identical in DPS, it would just be smarter to take Rets. If it came down to it and Survival Hunter was crazy and the extra mobility they get is just insane, or if you needed more burst on like a shorter cooldown and like maybe Rets didn't have that, there's room and potential for a Survival Hunter to be there. But that also primarily is just depending on the numbers tuning. And how it is currently, Survival Hunters do not look like they're in a good place. If that changed and they got, a big buff across the board and they were much higher DPS, it's totally acceptable to have a Survival Hunter in your raid, especially if they're filling a niche role that you might need or you might not have. And they're much better than, say, in current situations like an Ellie Shaman. If you don't need the ranged, Ellie Shaman brings Windrush Totem, which every single other druid now has baseline. So, like, if you have a Survival Hunter and an Ellie that are doing the same amount of damage, you might actually pick the Survival Hunter in some unusual cases. But it really just depends, again, on the numbers tuning.
And
At least from my perspective.
And just to be clear, this is negating player skill. Like,
Oh,
we're-
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
yeah. You have
we
to, when you're having a conversation like this,
Right.
it has to be subtracting player skill.
which we understand that, and we'll go through the raid. We trial people. We even after people pass their trial, we keep an eye on people. Like if we got people that are just slipping or they aren't keeping up, even if they are playing a meta class and they bring utility, if they just can't keep up with the better player, then we have to bring in the better player.
Yeah.
But it doesn't hurt. But the discussion we're having right now is it doesn't hurt to play the class with the utility. Whatever's helping the raid overall.
It's probably encouraged more than anything else, I would say.
I agree.
It's unfortunate because like there's certain classes, like we talked about this as soon as Shadow Priest got changed. I'm not going to say ruined, but for me it's ruined. But when Shadow Priest got changed, I initially messaged Rise because I knew that if I messaged Meeps, he would fly to Canada and cut my head off. The meme is that I main switch like 17 times a tier. So I messaged Rise as soon as the Shadow Priest change was announced, and I told him like, "Hey, new main for Shadowlands. What's it gonna be? What do you think?" And he's like, "What's a playstyle you like?" And I was like, "Fast paced, high APM, fuck shit up damage wise." And he's like, "All right, so melee arranged." And I'm like, "Doesn't really matter. Kind of leaning towards melee." And we narrowed it down to basically like DH, enhancement, shaman, and feral. Of those, only one would have a raid spot in our ideal comp for a raid, and you only want one,
Right.
and that's the DH. Both the other classes would be useless as far as comp goes. Again, when you're taking out player skill, it's a feels bad, man, because what can you do?
Yeah. And, to just, like, add the little note about it, because we haven't really hit that issue. Player skill is infinitely more important in most cases than the class you bring. For example, in current tier, if you have, a 99 percentile parsing, incredibly mechanically skilled feral druid in your raid, it's going to beat fire mages. Not all the time, but it's going to be better than someone coming in as a 40% fire mage that's just following what everyone else is doing, and maybe they can put up the numbers, maybe they can't, maybe they have to struggle with mechanics. Even though the feral is a melee class that brings almost no utility in current content, damn, if they're a good player and they know what's going on with feral, they can pump. They can be fire mages, they can be destro warlocks, they can be shadow priests for AoE, they can kill it. So there's a good point of the conversation where it's like, yeah, we're subtracting player skill, but player skill is probably the most important thing. If we had someone that came into raid and they said, I am the, world's best survival hunter, I'm gonna look at them and be like, hell yeah, we're taking you. Yeah, get in here, bring your survival hunter, kick some of our asses, beat out the affliction warlocks, the shadow priests, the marksman hunters, all the classes that are looking really solid for the new raid tier. If they'll just get destroyed, and everyone's gonna look at it and be like, wow, I wish I was that good at survival, or I wish I was that good at feral or something else. So that is a really big part that we haven't really touched on, but just to, give credit where credit is due.
Right.
Yeah.
There are incredible survival hunter players out there. There are incredible feral druid players out there. They're not, super large in number, but man, if they were in our raid team, they would kick out our fire mage, they would kick out our Ellie shaman, they would kick out our shadow priest, whatever the case may be. They would definitely earn their spot.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of those things though. Like, this conversation is subtract player skill, because you can't really have this conversation while keeping player skill involved in the conversation. I think it's just too complicated.
Essentially,
but yeah,
even if we had the best 2 bear druids in the world, the best 4 resto druids in the world, and the best 16 kitty druids in the world, 14 kitty druids in the world, even if we had that, it would be fucking difficult if we just had that, just all druids. Like, that would be worse having the best of the best on their druids than it would be having utility, actual utility. There's no immunities in that crowd. Sure, there's battle reses, but you can only use them every so often. You don't have the buffs. So
it definitely makes it harder, like, on a...
So what we need is a balance. Like, I guess you could say that the buffs that individual classes and specs bring are a crutch or a handicap. They help. Like, you need them. These fights are no joke. Like, you need skill. You need every little scrap of help you can get usually for the end bosses, unless you're stacking shadow priests on.
Ootnat.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I guess at that point it might just come down to the game designer's perspective. If they're really looking at a class like, oh, we could buff survival hunter, but man, if we do, it's going to break them in this scenario. Like, that might not be a healthy choice. So maybe it's that way for a reason. Maybe they're balancing survival. Maybe survival hunter's a secret OP where, like, at their max potential they just do so much goddamn damage that it doesn't matter what they bring. Maybe it's the same for, like, a rogue, because we didn't really touch on the rogue too much, but, like, a rogue, they can bring a raid wide stealth, which doesn't really help in most cases, and they can bring an immunity. So it's like, why wouldn't you just bring a ret? But man, there are some times where rogues just bring so much fucking burst damage that you want a rogue. Like, there have been times where it's like, man, I really wish we had a fucking rogue in raid. And now that we have, Sad, who's in our raid as a rogue, like, seeing him pop off, and it's like, wow, you're currently beating a fire mage on Mythic N'Zoth. That's strange. Having those moments, it's like, that class earns that spot for that kind of reason, for that kind of purpose, for that kind of tool set.
Yeah.
Rogues bring a lot of other things, but, sometimes it's a harder encounter, or sometimes harder to do so in raid.
And a class like, say, mage, I think fire mage is a bad example because, yes, they're doing Mongo damage, but they also bring an immunity. So let's say kitty druids overall were doing this kind of damage that fire mages were. That's a form of utility in itself. Like, that can trump utility just because it's such fat damage. Like, if mages didn't have their massive damage, they'd still be brought because of their immunity.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's where it's kind of imbalanced in some cases. Because, like, one of the things that I thought for a while, and I guess this is a little off topic, but I thought if they really wanted to truly balance the game, then they would just give every class an immunity. They would make a defensive cooldown for every class the same amount of percent with the same amount of time. But then at the same time, that would make the game boring and would, create like small nuance where it's not necessarily, your class doesn't have something cool, you're not flavorful. It would just be at that point play whatever you want, but everything's the same. So I think it is a viable reason to say that yeah, some of these classes have an immunity, which just for mythic raiding in particular makes them better. But that same immunity might not be great in PvP. It might be kind of worthless. Having a survival hunter popping turtle in PvP might actually be super cool because with their immunity, at least they can move.
Yeah.
Maybe saying that like, oh, well, a frost mage in PvP is awesome because they can slow on every hit, and then that also transmutes to raid, so they can slow priority mobs, but maybe they just don't have the damage of fire mage. That still means that frost has a nuance, and I think that's kind of the important with game design. So that
And
all stems back to like how they balance the game with damage, with utility, and they all just have to make it fair. Otherwise, you'll have world first cases of Utnat where they bring 8 shadow priests and 4 elemental shamans, and it just looks like a fucking mess.
and speaking of PvP, survival is the number one hunter spec in PvP. It dominates in PvP, which I think because of there's 3 major aspects it seems right now to WoW. You got your dungeons, you got your raids, you got your arenas, and I think it's fine if that if say the class you want to play in raid doesn't do well in raid, but it does really well in another area. I think that's fine that their balancing is skewed in that direction.
That I don't know how I feel about that. That feels really.
How can you balance all 3?
You can't.
I mean, look,
I don't
you
think there's a way
can't,
to.
but I think I think at a certain point you have to commit to balancing one way or the other, and I don't know if you're never going to make everybody happy, obviously, right? But there's going to be a certain amount of I guess acceptable annoyance that Blizzard will have to make a decision on, how much annoyance they're completely allowing, or not allowing, but how much annoyance they're okay with just hearing from the audience or from the player base. If you have something that is balanced, for PvP or for Mythic Plus, but it's just dog tier in raid, and they never get brought to raid because they are just that bad, then everybody that loves that class is just going to complain about.
It's not class wide though.
Class is so bad.
It's never class wide. It's
Spec,
but I think that's why I think it's fine though. Like if you want to play survival hunter, that's what you love. Well, there's an arena, literally an arena for you. But
yeah.
But you're gonna have to switch to a different spec if you want to go into raid.
Well,
Right.
one of the things that I mentioned before is that like it would ruin the game if every class, even if they had like little bits of different flavor, if every class did the exact same thing, it would kill the game. Like you can't have a fire mage say this ability, you throw a fireball and it changes to 5 targets and it does X amount of damage. That'd be cool. But then saying that chain lightning, well, that also hits 5 targets and it's
Right.
just a lightning bolt instead of a fireball. That would break the game. It wouldn't be
Too
fun
much
at that point. You wouldn't do
homogenization.
anything.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I think that the balance in that case is needed, but yeah, it's really hard to balance a game that says, look, here's what you do in raid. Now we make all of them balanced for raid. Well, that breaks this class in Mythic Plus because now they're scaled. So every single time you go from raid to dungeon to open world to PvP, is there a different set of scaling? Is there a different set of balance? I think that would be a humongous undertaking. Whether that might make the game fair, quote unquote, no, that's debatable. But I think overall, that kind of is what makes a game like this really interesting. Because you can play a survival hunter, and some survival hunters have killed Mythic N'Zoth, for example, in current tier, and they probably have the raid spot, and they probably pump harder than, an average fire mage or a destro or, some other class that's doing really well. And then that same person can also go into arena, and they can fucking pump. They don't probably have to try as hard because of the class, but I think that's also makes it a little bit interesting to make that choice. It's an interesting thing to make a Shadow Priest, and then you feel worthless, and then you hit Drestagath, and you're like, oh, this is insane, and you pop off. That's somewhat of a choice, even though I don't agree, that those things are balanced, like, not correctly, they're imbalanced, but I think that at least to some degree it's fair. Do I think the game is balanced right now? No, but I think that it should be balanced a little bit better to, make those things not outliers. Like the Fire Mage right now is an outlier. Unfortunately, looking at the beta for Shadowlands, Survival Hunter seems like an outlier down in far as the damage. Shadow Priest looks like the top of its class. It's an outlier. Those things will also hurt the RPG element. So things can't be 100% identical, but there needs to be enough balance to make it feel fun and make your choice interactive. And then, Blizzard will eventually, hopefully, balance it based on whatever content you're going to.
And right now, with the Shadowlands numbers, I'd take it with a grain of salt. Those are definitely going to shift drastically. And it's the Shadowlands Survival Hunter. It's not the numbers that concern me. It's the lack of any attention whatsoever from Blizzard. They haven't been messed with hardly at all. They're really buggy. Like some of their abilities, one of their abilities is a shot that requires you to be holding an axe to use. Yep. So they're bugged to hell right now, and Blizzard. Yeah. Whereas Shadow Priest is like or Priest in general. I don't know if you guys have seen the Holy Priest changes, but wow, like the Shadow Priest, yeah, they got a complete rework. And aside from Jay, most people love the rework, but no one's talking about Holy, and Holy's the one that's like the big dog. Like I guarantee we're gonna see a lot more Holy Priests than we have in the past couple expansions. But like, whereas Priest seems like the favorite child right now, Survival is completely forgotten. And I think Monk, even though Monk has been receiving attention, I think they are the buggiest class right now. Like, just the interactions with their abilities, some aren't working at all. Some, like, the tooltip says one thing, but the numbers are completely different. Even BM Hunter, one of their talents does literally 0 damage. Like, it's supposed to attack and do damage, but it's doing 0. It's just hitting for zeros. So right now, the numbers are nowhere near what they're going to be. Because, like I said, there's going to be tuning passes and there's bugs. There's so many bugs right now. And we're a month and a half away from the expansion.
Yeah. They have a lot of work to do, but I hope they'll do it. And, most likely it'll be they're doing all of this number changing right now, and then right as the raid drops, they'll hit all the number changes for tuning for characters. But I really hope that a lot of those larger issues, more specifically the bugs for certain classes, things that seem like outliers, like this is a good segue, like one of the legendaries for Affliction Warlock is just totally fucking bonkers broken. Like monks aren't working correctly, like people are having and finding their pets for BM hunters are just breaking and clipping through walls and getting stuck on shit that they shouldn't be stuck on. Like, for example, monks, part of their rotation as far as like using different spells every time, like that buff isn't transmuting for some spells, like the spells don't even count on the combo system, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and as long as those things are tuned, the game will still function, and then they'll do numbers tuning as it goes, but that is a very large concern to have.
Right.
I don't think I've seen betas this buggy in terms of like classes this close to release. It really concerns me.
Fallout 76.
No, I mean for WoW. Like
I was actually thinking
shots fired.
The exact same thing, I'm not gonna lie.
Obviously.
Fallout
76 is still in beta.
Yeah, it is.
But no, I'm talking about WoW expansion releases. It's, from what I can remember, it's like we've never come this close to release and had this much just basic gameplay bugginess. It's really concerning. I wouldn't mind sitting in Nyalotha for another 4 months. I wouldn't mind waiting until the new year for Shadowlands, which I think that ship's already sailed, but I really wish that they delay it.
Yeah, if it was another month, I think it'd be totally acceptable. I'd wait 2 months for a quote-unquote better game, but that's just me.
But we're here to talk about what we do have.
Yeah, the non-hypotheticals,
right.
Even though we can dabble in those a little bit. So yeah, I guess because I kind of brought it up really vaguely, there is one borrowed powered system that we haven't touched on too much, and I think it's probably going to be a pretty quick one. But
Yeah.
legendaries are coming back, and then there's also content associated with that. Where I guess that's where we can go afterwards. But how do you guys feel about legendaries making a return? Obviously, in Legion, they were not family friendly whatsoever. Getting one every month, maybe 2 months if you were lucky,
They,
just by RNG.
Initially.
yeah, they
Initially,
finally
yes,
fixed
true.
it, and the end of the expansion, they finally fixed it.
Hmm.
And what I will say is, if they learned from that, which it seems like maybe they have,
Yeah.
that's a good thing. Because um, I love the legendary system. I think it's really cool. As long as you can target, which this one it appears obviously you can. As long as you go and find the recipe, you can literally just build
Build
whichever
it.
one it is that you want to build.
Yep.
So that, amazing.
Oh yeah.
Mwah.
If they had made it completely random like Legion was, oh no.
The most important thing, at least from me, as far as takeaway point there, it's
Yeah.
player choice. I can look at them and I can be like, okay, do I want the AoE one? Do I want the healing one? Do I want the one that makes my elemental badass? I make that choice now, which is super, super nice, especially with all the other things that we've mentioned about that you don't necessarily have a choice in, or it's going to be a disastrous choice. This one is a relatively straightforward, easy choice that everyone
Yeah.
gets to make at their own leisure.
It's almost a shame because it's almost like another talent, like in how they operate. And some legendaries change how you play your class a bit. No, I don't think any of them. I don't think any of them that you completely change how you play your spec around the legendary, but some do change up how you play a bit.
That's fair. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
There's a couple that seem good, but I think the key takeaway is that I haven't seen any, obviously, except for one for an Affliction Warlock, thanks Blizzard, that seems game changing. They seem impactful to some part of your kit, but there's not one that's like, oh, you use this, and for like example, for like Elemental Shaman, there's not a legendary that when I equip it, I do not cast Lava Burst anymore, which is like a problem
Right.
of current tier, even though there's not legendaries currently, but you get the point. There's not one that says, this button is now the core of your rotation. This thing that you can now do breaks the game. It's just, it enhances something about your toolkit, and it can be something that you want to do. You can be looking for the one that's numerically the best for a certain fight. You can look at the one that, I really need healing, so I can pick the one that's just good all the way around. It's a stat stick, and I get a bunch of heals or whatever, and that way I don't die in raid. It's cool that you get to make the option instead of just, I randomly wait for my 15th week and I have 2 legendaries left, and I got a legendary and it's the bad one, so I have to wait another 2 weeks before I get my best legendary. That's where
Right.
it feels terrible.
I do like how they've been moving away from completely randomized loot to more deterministic. I think that we're reaching the happy medium. I think that both have pros and cons, and we need both. And it's nice to see them finally move back toward a bit of deterministic.
Yeah, I agree.
I really like deterministic crafting and deterministic power gain. Like whether it's in an ARPG or an MMORPG or whatever. The being able, nothing feels worse than random drops over and over and over that are useless. My Legion experience of my priest was terrible because Sifu's was literally the last legendary I got. It
Feels
was
bad,
terrible.
man.
And it
Yeah.
was your number one bis. What can you do? And that sucks. So the fact that you can make it, I'm definitely making the double keg smash one first. That's my go-to. So like I'm super excited for that because it allows them to, the legendary specifically, it allows you to change how your class plays in a way that you want. So it's not random. You're not forced to wear it. I mean, let's be honest. We're forced to wear the legendaries, but only in the nature of like, you can totally gimp yourself and not wear them if you don't want to. But let's be honest,
Yeah.
everybody's going to.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so funny how like different you and I are right now, Jay. Like I'm like, I don't even know I'm not even 100% certain of what class I'm playing. You're like, I'm playing Brewmaster Monk, I'm playing this Covenant, I'm making this legendary, I'm taking this leveling path, I'm going to do this farm. Like it's all set. I'm just, the day is marked.
Yep.
Yeah.
I haven't gone as far as like gotten time off work or anything like that, and I don't know the leveling routes or anything like that. But you're absolutely right. I am already committed to what I'm going to do. I'm excited for it. I'm ready to go.
Nice. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
I'm in a similar boat. At least for if I am playing Elemental Shaman, I know everything that's going to happen. And I'm going to be cautious the first day, especially for my Covenant choices, but I'm pretty sure I know exactly what's going on for me as well. So I'm in a similar boat than Jay with a little bit of the healthy medium mixed in. So I guess speaking of legendaries, this is something that I am very passionate about specifically, Torghast.
And before
I
we
don't know
get
how.
before we
Oh, go
get to
ahead.
that, I just wanted to say that we're kind of glossing over legendaries because there's so many to get into,
Mhm.
and aside from a couple notable ones like that, Rise mentioned the Affliction Warlock one, and Jay mentioned his. Uh, it's just a lot to get into. Like
Oh yeah.
if you want to look it up, then feel free to do that on your own time. There's just so much there.
Yeah.
hmm
But yeah, we are moving on to Torghast now. And sorry, what were you saying about Torghast?
Oh man, I look at Tourgast. I have an interesting prediction. I think people will
Okay, I
join
just
and
realized what it is. The reason you keep misspelling Torghast is
Keeps
because you're
calling it.
also thinking of it wrong. It's not Tourgast, it's Torghast. Like the onion router, but a ghost version of it.
Cool Whip. Anywho,
Yes. Okay, for the memes, every time we're talking about Torghast and he types it's always spelled wrong. So we've been giving him shit for it for like 3 weeks.
it's Cool Whip.
Cool whip.
Uh, anywho,
Love you.
for Tourgast, I really think there are going to be people that are going to come into WoW and play only for Tourgast because it feels like a game in itself. It feels like something that someone could come in and sink hundreds of hours to and play on different characters. Like for example, like a game that I was really into in high school was The Binding of Isaac. I played that game so much, and every single playthrough it was okay. Well, I have this one or two items now. I can make a build. Now I can choose what I want to find. You know where I find it. I learn all the little secrets and all the little nuances, and I played the shit out of that game. So the fact that they're adding something like that, that seems like a big important piece of content that, like for a Mythic Raider, you do it once, twice a week to get your Ash or whatever to make your legendaries, and then past that it's whatever. But there are going to be some people that are going to sink time into that and find insane combinations and have amazing clips of them just like for example like there was one for demon hunters where it was they can't walk but they can fell rush infinitely and it's just they're fell rushing around the map and just killing everything one shot. Like there's going to be some really cool shit going on there. I think it's one of the best pieces of content, at least I'm hoping, that they
Right.
will ever have added.
I think
Bold statement.
it's it's part of what they've been doing. Like they've been adding shitty versions of other games, like Pokemon. You got your pet battles as a Pokemon. You got your Bejeweled and the Najatar dailies. Now they're adding a roguelike, which I think this is a well implemented though roguelike from what it seems, and hopefully they build on it as we go on because it will get old if they don't do anything with it for the rest of the expansion. Like Visions. Everyone, well, a large part of the community enjoyed Visions maybe the first 6 weeks. But now, after you go in and over again, and now you're farming it to finish out your sockets, it's gotten old.
Yeah, I can agree to that. The only thing that I'll say that is really different from that, I don't look at it as a roguelike feature, but more of an arcade feature. It feels very arcadey to me, especially in the aspects of like what Rise mentioned with the DH Fell Rush thing, or the Blink one for mages is very much the same. Um, it doesn't always have to be the same one. Like it's random which bonuses you get every time, and it's repeatable content that you like the barrier to entry is literally clicking on an NPC or clicking on the gate and being like, I want to do Torghast. You
Right.
don't have to farm some arbitrarily world shit in order to go in there. If you just want to live in Torghast as soon as you level cap, or maybe sooner, I don't know if you can get in before you level cap, but then you can just go and only do that. And I mean, hopefully they keep adding to it like you had said, but they've said that it's designed to be an endless feature with no end. So I mean, theoretically, if you want to treat it like a Greater Rift in Diablo 3 and you just go and go and go and go and go, I just absolutely love that. I think it is a fantastic feature. I don't see how they could like it's like they tailor-made it specifically for me. I love it so much. I think it's so cool.
Well, the important thing to note in on that from my perspective is Torghast is something that is replayable content. And it's not a vision. It's not something that, oh, I get in there and I do the same route, I stun the same mobs, I kill the same boss, I do
Right.
the exact same mechanic. It's, I go in here, oh god, what am I going to find this time? What cool affects am I going to do? Am I going to be able to stack some crazy build, or am I going to do something that I've never tried before? And it's not like, oh, I failed a Torghast run, poor me. That's not a negative. Like, you can fail a Torghast run and be like, man, that build didn't work, or damn, I got screwed over on that mob or whatever. But in comparison to like a vision, it's like I burn my vessel and now I am a week behind on my cloak because there's not enough, coalescing visions to farm. And then I feel like I'm losing content. But Torghast, it's I go in there, I can burn 100 of them in a month on my Demon Hunter, and I'm bored. Okay, well, let me level a Druid, because I saw a clip of some guy on YouTube running a really cool Feral Druid build where
Right.
his bleeds lasted forever, or they infinitely stacked, or some crazy shit. And you have people that are going to be explorative now. It's not going to be, I'm playing this class and I'm doing some Torghast. It's going to be, wow, I want to see what Fire Mage has, and they're going to switch to Fire Mage. Wow, that was really cool. I'm going to play Arcane. I'm going to play Frost. Oh wow, I saw this really cool thing, or I think that it'd be cool and fun. What are they going to do with Demon Hunter? And you're going to hop in, play Vengeance, play Havoc. You're going to switch to a Druid. You're going to play all Druid specs. It's going to be crazy how much diversity it's going to bring to the game, and it's really going to open people to the idea of that they can grab any class and go dick around with it at a godly potential. It's going to be so incredibly fun.
That's something I alluded to last week, though, is they've got this, Torghast especially, they've got this draw where you want to play multiple characters. At the same time, they've got systems where, well, if you want to play this character at a decent level, you're going to have to do some grinding, you're going to have to do some gearing up. So you're going to have to sink some time before you can actually get to the fun. So it comes down to how much time do you have to sink into how many characters. Sure, it looks like fun, like that dude just broke Torghast on his Druid, but your Druid's at level 50, so are you going to level your Druid from 50 to 60 and then go through the gear grind that he went through? You're going to have to build the legendary that he built, all to get into Torghast. It's kind of a systems working against each other, because I totally agree. I think, one or two, like two or three, maybe the end of the expansion, a couple tiers into the game, whenever I've had that time to level my other characters and, do minimal the minimal time sink to do the catch up mechanics that come in at that point in the game and actually get in there. Sure, I'm sure that I'll love that. But man, especially thinking first tier, how many characters are we really going to have in the Torghast? And just the first tier is going to kind of be, we'll see those videos of like someone playing Shadow Priest, and none of us even in our raid playing Shadow Priest will see someone playing Shadow Priest just destroying and having a blast in Torghast. At the same time, though, because of the random nature of the buffs that you get in Torghast, that could be a marksmanship hunter 1 week, like just ripping through everything, and then the next week you just keep getting defensive buffs. Like, yeah, sure, nothing will kill me, but I'm doing no damage. This is just a grind. I'm taking an hour to do what I did in 20 minutes last week. So, yes, I am also very much excited for Torghast, but I'm not overexcited for it because it's Blizzard, and I'm always expecting the other shoe to drop. And
well, one of the important things is that, yes, Torghast does have a late game power system linked to it, But again, the nice thing is that instead of it being a vessel or something that you have to go farm, like in Legion, it's not, oh, I do this every 3 days, my little defense mission, and I power up the Nightborn. It's I go do it, and if it takes me one time because I got really bad RNG with all defensive stuff and I couldn't kill the last boss, then it takes you 2 or 3 tries. Sure, that's fine to get the material that you want. But the most important thing to me is that every single time you walk in there, it's going to feel different. I have this feeling that people are going to want to go in there and do almost like a leaderboard. Like, there will be people that will, quote unquote, speed run Torghast and have these crazy videos of, I was playing Enhancement Shaman and I have the fastest world record clear time because I got these buffs, and you guys should try it too. And there's going to be a ton of shamans that are going to go and all of a sudden get level cap and go into Torghast and dick around and try to do that. It's just going to be a fun sync. It's not like Islands where, yeah, Islands are repeatable, but it's the same thing every time, and there's a reward link to it. Torghast is going to be, I get to make a class feel broken. I get to feel empowered. I get to have player choice inside of my Torghast runs, and I'm just going to go blow things up for an hour because I'm bored. They might give you a little reward, they might not, but there's a really high chance, in my opinion, that a lot of people are going to look at Torghast and be like, I'm going to play the shit out of this content. It's never ending. It's always different. It's replayable. I can play it on 100 different characters. I get some amount of bonus, which is cool, but I might just play it because it's so damn fun. Especially more casuals are going to be doing this too.
Right. Which is something I think WoW is needed, is something that I'm going to do this for the fun in WoW. I'm not doing it because I have to grind it for my player power so I can do my arenas or Mythic Plus or Raid. Like, I'm not doing a chore to get to an endgame. I can just go into the endgame and have fun.
And I think that's the upside of it being arcadey like that, is that it is more accessible to the casual player. Because it doesn't have that grind like current Visions do. Because it's more accessible, those casual players are going to be able to basically just jump right in however they want to.
Jay, you haven't said much outside of you like the arcadey feel.
I really do. I don't know if you could tell.
Gotcha. Are you planning on eventually making... Well, I know you're eventually going to main swap. That's just a given. But are you thinking about maybe making a second tune that you aren't main swapping to just to get into Torghast and play on?
Not specifically for Torghast. Torghast is not going to be a priority for me. Obviously, my priority is Mythic Raid and Mythic Plus. I guess maybe it's not obvious, but my priorities are Mythic Plus and Mythic Raid. So Torghast looks like it's going to be something fun that I can do when, I don't really want to run keys and I'm done with my dailies and, I just want to, maybe just log on WoW, chill, maybe do something a little bit fun. Then I'll probably run Torghast. My current plan is, obviously, the Brew is going to be my main. I think Vengeance DH I'm going to have as an alt. It was a thought that, like, oh, this could be really fun in Torghast, but the decision to have that as my main alt was mostly because, let's say Brew isn't good on a specific fight, but Vengeance is. If I have one available, then I can just make the raid's life a little bit easier by having that option if needed. So my focus is in a different spot.
Right.
But it's still something that I'm super excited for.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, then let's move on to something that we alluded to, and that's the grinds, the rep farming, the dailies, raid prep. Have you guys looked much into what's going to be required for getting into raiding?
I just want to give a quick overview of the things that people may think of and may not think of. An expansion starts, you're going to pick your character to raid on, if that's what your goal is. You're going to go through the leveling, then you're going to have to pick your Covenant, then you're going to have to do Covenant quest lines, endgame quest lines. There's probably going to be some unique raid quest line. You're going to want to do a bunch of Covenant gearing. You're going to want to start doing world quests. You're probably going to want to try to make some amount of, resource based on your crafting profession. So you're probably going to do that for a couple hours. If you're looking towards mythic raiding, you're going to want to get a group for your heroic dungeons, then your mythic dungeons. And once those are all locked out, you're going to try to do mythic plus if it's available. You're going to want to do all the content. You're going to want to run your tour gas for the week. You're going to, want to do any weekly things that are related. And people don't realize that for like the first week of an expansion, that's a lot of time to sink, especially when you have nothing, when you don't have the item level, when you don't have all those resources. So for me, when I was thinking about it, I'm like, man, I'm going to push through all my leveling in a day, or at least try to on my first character. And then I'm going to get a group on day 2, and we're going to run a bunch of dungeons. And then I'm just going to sit there and explore the game most likely for the next 5-6 days until the weekly reset. And then it's going to go all over again. In particularly, I know that rep grinding is supposedly not that important, but I am going to hold to the philosophy that every single time they reset, I'm probably going to do every single world quest that is physically available to make sure that I have the most possible power going into that first raid tier. I'm going to make sure that I am going out and doing herbalism. That way I can make enough money or make good enough potions. That way when we step into raid, I'm all potioned up. Someone else's potions. I can give out potions. I can drop a cauldron for the raid, those kind of things, when we have the recipe. But all those things, that's a lot of time to sink in. And some people that, maybe if you're a more casual raider and you're seeing this, those are things that you might not do. You might not even raid the first week when it's open. You might be stuck on heroic for a couple weeks without food, without flasks, without all your, crafting professions, all your armor kits, paddings, things like that, your whetstones for your melee. There's a lot to do. Okay. And that's a lot of prep work. And it's not one person that has to do all of it. It's 20 people need to all be prepared equally to step into heroic the first day and step into mythic on week 2. It's going to be
more if your roster is larger.
Oh yeah. It's going to be a grind and a half. But I think that it's manageable. There are a lot of systems in play where you're going to have to do a lot of work, but I think it's manageable, especially if you're a more hardcore player like most of us are.
We briefly touched on it last week too, but the rep grinds are not going to be as bad. Mm-hmm. The gear from rep is not at exalted now. It's at
honored. No, revered.
Yeah. It's honored.
It's honored or revered?
It's honored.
Honored, okay.
Honored.
So basically, really easy to get.
Yeah.
If you want to get that gear from rep, it's going to be very, very easy. Which is huge.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are things that I'm going to do. I'm going to try to take my one character, and then I'm going to completely max out. And then, at the start of an expansion, if I think I can manage it, I might try a second character. If I don't think I can manage it, and it seems impossible, or if I don't have enough time, I might level the tune to, 60 and then just leave it there. I might just run a bunch of store gas just to, have some really cool setups and stuff. But there is a lot of work that needs to go into it, especially from being that we're all officers and hold raid kind of leader positions in a guild. I'm going to need to make sure that I'm walking into the first raid with almost or maxed alchemy. That way I can drop a cauldron when I have the recipe. We need to make sure that someone in the guild has maxed cooking, someone has maxed enchanting, because that shit's going to be expensive.
I'll do the enchanting.
Yeah, but we're going to want to have one of those things each, so that's a couple extra hours that I need to put in to go farm all my herbs to get my level up, and I might ask for donations from people if they're willing. Jay is going to do enchanting, so we might ask everyone, hey, when you get a green, throw it in the guild bank, and we'll disenchant it, and we'll give everyone enchants when we get into the raid. That's a really big thing, especially at the start of a raid tier when those things are expensive. And they're hard to come by. It's not like BFA, I do a world quest and I get a purple piece of gear and I dismantle it into a veiled crystal. It's, I do a mythic dungeon and someone didn't need their drop, which is kind of an anomaly the first week, and that's how we get good enchants week 1. That shit's expensive. Yep. So it's gonna feel like a job, especially for those world top raiders or those, really hard pushing teams. They're gonna have tons of work to do. They're gonna rep grind, they're gonna clear every world quest, they're gonna do every dungeon, they're gonna do a bunch of tour gas on multiple characters, and then you also have to consider the base things like just leveling and doing your Covenant quest line. There's a shit ton of work that needs to get put in. Some people might not do it all. Some people might not need to do it all. Some people are casual and they're just going to level and then just mess around with their Covenant and do that stuff. But for our perspective, there is a lot that's going to get done that first week, that first 2-3 weeks.
And to touch on, like you were talking about how you were going to rep grind, they've changed it to kind of not prevent that, but make it more difficult. The quests are longer now. Like, you're looking at a 20-minute,
Oh, yeah.
15, 20-minute quest. So, just from a time sink perspective, I think we're going to get to the point where, pretty quickly, where we're just doing, our daily cap. We'll do however many quests it is to hit the amount of experience, the amount of rep that we need for the power gain. And then they've got, Revered and Exalted will go into kind of cosmetic gains, and I think we'll hit that pretty quickly. Of like, well, this just isn't worth the time investment to spend another 2 hours for a slight gain toward cosmetics.
Mm-hmm. It will hit that time eventually.
Yeah,
but also consider that we're not talking about some other things like there's going to be crazy people that every week they're going to do all these things, plus they're going to PvP cap. Plus, they're going to do 10 Mythic Plus dungeons to get their Great Vault thing correct. They're going to go in, if they can't kill them on, Heroic, they're going to go into a normal Pug and kill 10 bosses to get their Great Vault. There's going to be a lot of content to do, and it's going to be really fresh and new, and that's what's going to make it exciting as well for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just hoping it doesn't grind us out like BFA did.
Well, in BFA, there were a lot of systems to start with, but a lot of those systems, considering all things, a lot of those were RNG related, like the Azurite gear. Some of the essences, yeah, you could target them, but they were really grinds. I have a feeling that a lot of these grinds come Shadowlands are going to be lessened, and they're going to be a little bit shorter. Obviously, things like dailies are going to take longer, but that's not exactly the point. But it's going to feel more rewarding because of the player choice aspect of some of the bonuses, and then it should feel new and exciting to the point where you're not going to burn out. You're going to want to do them for the power gain immediately. Eventually, yeah, at the end of the expansion, a year down the road, when we're waiting for the new expansion at that time, it might be boring, but for the time being, it's going to be fun to do those things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, I think we've hit on a lot of the stuff, but one thing that we haven't exactly given our full retrospective on, because it's cool that Shadowlands has a release date now, so we can actually truly give a retrospective on how we think everything is going to go as a whole. Not to hamper on one specific topic, but what are your guys' overall predictions of Shadowlands?
Jay, you want to take this?
I hadn't thought about it.
I can start if you want to get a little time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Give me a second.
Sure. So, for me, I think Shadowlands is going to be an incredibly new, good breath fresh of air, like an expansion always is. It's going to entice people to come back to the game. It's going to make them want to play. As far as things that I am excited for, I'm excited for the fact that some instances are changing where I'm going to get player choice. There's going to be a lot of new content that's going to be fun. It's going to be very flavorful. That's going to be awesome. There's new class changes. There's new balancing. So I'm going to feel that there's a competitive edge with people, and that's going to make the competitiveness going to a raid tier really fun. The new raid tier is going to be awesome. The new dungeons are going to feel fresh and amazing. The one thing that is going to always be scary when you're going into an expansion, from my perspective, is going to be the balance of the borrowed powers, the covenants, how they're going to work in Mythic Plus, if the legendaries, if they tune them poorly, if they flop, if my character choice was bad. However, those things, at least for me, I think are going to be manageable. So I am very excited, and I think that the start of the expansion is going to be stressful until they get things dialed in. And it's, comes back to a thought that I had last time, is sometimes it takes Blizzard a couple months to balance things, and that's when it can be really stressful. So I'm going to make this prediction. I think that the first 4 months of Shadowlands is going to feel fun and refreshing, but for top-end Mythic Raid standpoint, it's going to be very stressful. On stressful par of Old Year in BFA. Because things aren't going to be balanced correctly, things are going to need to be changed, Blizzard needs to do some tuning to make everything feel good. But once it hits that wall where they kind of balance everything out and things are more adjusted and they fix all the bugs and all the nuances, then I think the expansion will be at a much better place, and I'm assuming that it will be on par or better than the Legion expansion. So as an overall rating, to give it a number, I currently think the start of the expansion is going to be a 6.5 out of 10, and then once they have the balancing, it's going to be a 9 out of 10. if I had to give it numerical value.
Fuck, I hope you're right.
I hope so too.
Um, I mean, I think everybody kind of knows the general kind of community's theme on how uh, the expansions have gone in past years. So, for example, what I mean by that is like one's good, next one's bad. One's good, next one's bad. You know, so we had Mop, they gave us Draenor. Then we had Legion, and then we got Beta for Azeroth. So I'm really hoping that Shadowlands is going to be yay. All the majority of the signs are pointing to it's going to be awesome. Most of the positive stuff that we have talked about today, I am super excited for, and I think that's all going to be great stuff. The parts that worry me, obviously, the borrowed power and all that stuff, is the things that are a little bit okay. But all the things that I have seen so far, vampire themed raid, I love vampires. The dungeons are all cool. Even if you take out, the vampire aspect for one of them, or whatever, they all have a very clear theme, and they're unique and different from each other. And that to me is a really cool thing. I'm a huge fan of environment. All of those things are cool. The unpruning that they did is probably one of my favorite things that they are doing for Shadowlands. Just the fact that they're giving back all the classes, all of the stuff that they had is amazing. I don't know why they took them away in the first place. If people bitch that they have too many keybinds, fuck them. Buy 2 keyboards. But maybe I'm alone on that. But I don't think pruning away things is good. Give people more options. Give people more things to do. But the one thing that I've seen, and I've said this repeatedly since, well before the podcast, whenever we were talking about like, oh man, what do you think of the next expansion? Blah, 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 is player choice. And it looks like they are actually taking that seriously. Since they mentioned it, think about all the things that you have player choice wise. Your Covenant, it's player choice. Sure, balance is a thing. The power associated to it is a big debate. But whether they pull the ripcord or not, again, give them time. But whether they pull the ripcord or not, that's still a choice. Your Torghast, like, that's 100% a choice. Like, you don't have to do it. I mean, you do a little bit for, your legendaries or whatever. But after that, like, there's no specific reason why you should feel forced to continue going in there after that over and over and over. You don't have to go super hard if you don't want to. There's a minimum that you have to meet to get your legendaries, to get your stuff. But after that, you can just choose to keep doing them. You can't do that with Visions. If you're a huge fan of Visions right now, you can't just run endless Visions. You're capped by how much, Echoes of Nyalotha you can get so that you can buy a thing to run a vessel and, or the World Quest, big thing in whatever zone it is, the weekly, and then the twice a week one. Like, there is limitations there. Torghast, no. And so that player choice to me is just one of the best things. I just hope they don't fuck it up with balance. And I'm really optimistic about it, mostly because when you look at how they started this whole thing, they really wanted the feedback, and they have done changes based on the feedback. It's like they asked for feedback, we gave them feedback, and they actually are acting on it, which is the most exciting for me. So that's why I'm not even just hoping Shadowlands is good. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be one of the best expansions. Maybe that's just rose-colored glasses, but I don't know.
If you had to give it a number, scale 1 to 10, and you can give different numbers for different time periods if you want, like I did. What would you give it?
Yeah. On release, I think comparative to certain releases, it's going to be certain things. Compared to WoD, I think it's going to be a 9. WoD release was absolutely terrible. Mostly because of server issues and all that stuff, but WoD release was really bad. Compared to Legion release, I'd say it's probably going to be like a 6. Compared to MOP release, like a 2. Like, just think about when MOP released, the intro to, all of that stuff was awesome.
Oh,
The issue with WoD,
a
like
lot of
going to
people
Tanan
hate it.
Jungle would crash all the time. You'd be stuck halfway through the quest and you're stuck in Tanan and you have nowhere to go because you DC'd in the middle of the arena and Thrallum, the NPCs, went through the doors already and it's blown up and you're like, what?
Or Horde waited for hours at the garrison because it was bugged.
Or Easy
Exactly.
doesn't get his Heart of Azeroth.
BFA,
Yeah, or stuff like that. Like, so compared to that, I think it's gonna be a 9. I think they're gonna be making sure that the release goes as flawlessly as they can. But compared to some of the better releases, I think it's gonna fall a little bit short of MOP, for example, or a Cataclysm, for example. Because I think the release for Cataclysm was awesome. I just think after that it kind of.
Okay.
By the end of the expansion, I'm gonna say solid 9. Probably
Wow.
midway through the expansion, it'll be 6 or 7. We're gonna dip a little bit, but as an overall beginning, 5, and it'll peter out in the middle, 6 or 7. By the end, 9.
Wow.
to get
Okay.
some comparison, what would you say was Legion's ending rating?
Ooh,
For me,
solid 8, maybe 9.
I would say the end of Legion was an 8. I liked the expansion. It had good feel. Kinda went weird with going to Argus thing, and that was interesting. How we just turned into a space game. We just went Star Wars on it.
Oh, you're
And
talking
lost flying.
lore-wise? I meant like
Well,
I
overall.
meant game mechanically.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, overall, I would say it was an 8
Oh,
for
okay.
me. Like, just that little thing made it not a 10 because I felt like that was really weird. We did some weird shit in Legion. But overall, gameplay-wise, raid-wise, the content-wise, probably an 8. There was some stuff that I would have liked to change, but overall, an 8.
Yeah.
All right, Meeps.
I don't know.
Well, I feel like I have to be a disinfectant for your optimism, and this comes down to largely the bugs, how close we are to release, and we've got core gameplay completely bugged to an unusable point, and just the completely skewed conduits, the completely skewed the Mythic Plus power, or the Covenant's Mythic Plus power. So largely, like, it's just this one system, but the fact that it's like Azrael armor, it's a core system to the game. The Covenants are probably the biggest system to the game in Shadowlands, and it is just in a really bad state, along with your core game mechanics of how your class works. So I'm thinking out of the gate, first month, a 4. I think like the new stuff is going to be exciting. I'm not even going to mind the grindiness because it doesn't seem to be as bad as it has been before, and I'm only playing one character as opposed to 2 or 3 at the same time. So I am looking forward to day-to-day gameplay, but just with the wackiness of the Covenants, the bugged classes right now, it's really dragging it down for me. However, I think just like Legion and BFA, where they steadily got better over time, I think it'll climb to an 8 by the end of the expansion and be... I don't know about how like the middle will go. Like if they don't learn quickly from... If they don't fix bugs, like that's number one. If they don't have these bugged rotations fixed by the middle of the expansion, that's gonna be awful. But it could be a thing. And then Covenants, like, it's just like Azerite armor. Like they wanted this system so badly that they jammed it in, and the way that they jam it in doesn't mesh very well with the rest of the game. So with Azerite armor, they fixed it over time. Will they do that with Covenants? So I'm guessing the mid will be about a 6, and toward the end we'll hit 8 or 9 overall. But like,
Fair enough. I think that's a fairly honest, accurate.
So basically, we all agree that regardless how we feel about launch, by the end of the expansion, it's going to be a great expansion.
That's the hope, yeah.
yeah.
Well, not hope. This is a prediction, like what we actually think, not what we
Well,
hope.
well, yes, I hope I'm very hopeful, but that's why my prediction is also there because with some of the things, it looks like it's going to be a very intense, flavorful, authentic experience. But at the same time, I could see that if they don't fix those things, especially early, it might not be as good. That's why, for example, I didn't give it a 10. That's why I was a little bit
Sure.
skimpy. And I didn't go to a 4 like Meep said in the beginning, but I can be certain that the beginning is gonna be maybe not a 4 rough in my eyes, but it's definitely not a good passing grade. That's why I gave it a D.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're about to wrap all this up, and we've got a question that I'll first pose to. Well, we'll all three answer it, and then we'll pose it to the chat. And if anyone wants to answer this question on YouTube, that'd be fantastic. And we'll get into that after the question. So, you guys, what is one thing you would currently change about Shadowlands?
That is a very easy one for me. It's actually something we talked about today. If you really want players to feel like they have a choice, make it so that the Covenants is a world-based thing, not a competitive gaming-based thing. I want to feel like a Kyrian superhero throwing spears during my world quest. When I'm doing my first Mythic Zero dungeon, I want to feel cool that I chose Kyrian and get a little bit of advantage. But when I'm pushing keys, when I'm doing competitive PvP, when I'm doing hardcore mythic raiding and we're doing really rough progression, I don't want the defining class of my character to be a choice that I made a month ago and I have no physical ability to switch if I made a bad choice. I want to feel cool, I want to feel powerful, I want to feel the power fantasy of the Shadowlands, but I don't want it to affect the hardcore gaming community because that's going to cause problems. That's what I would change. Make it, disable it for that content, make it so it's only world content, or balance it so much that it's not a skill, like it's not a power based choice. It's a fun, class, cosmetic, interesting, personal preference choice.
Hmm.
Jay, if you don't have anything yet, I've got something.
Yeah, you know what? You go first. I'll say
All
the
right.
last word.
Okay. So, and then I just completely blanked on it. Okay, no, it's Covenant. So, I think Covenants are fine. Okay, so I think the idea of Covenants, and you ally you ally yourself to a Covenant, you get their transmog, you get the mount, you get even the ability, even the Covenant specific ability and the class specific ability. I'm fine with all that. Get rid of the soul binds. That's it. Just get rid of them. There's so much power in them. They're going to be a nightmare to balance. It's just so unnecessary. If you need something like that, then even though like week-long quests like to switch covenants, that's fine too, as long as you get rid of the soul binds. But if you absolutely want them in there, implement them some other way. Something that's not locked to something that you can only change every week or so. Give us another talent row. Give us another 2 talent rows. Give us another talent tree. Like, let us spec into, like, not only you're a marksman, but you're a ranger marksman or a bard marksman. Because that's essentially what it is another talent tree.
For me, it would be take the player power away from our Covenant choices in Mythic Plus, maybe even Mythic Raid. Yeah, and mine's a quick and easy one because to me that's the only thing that can hold it back from being just.
All right, then.
It as a quick side note to just go with the ending. It's interesting that we all picked, relatively speaking, the same thing.
Right. All had to do with covenants.
I can't tell if that seems to me like it's going to be a really bad thing come the expansion launch, but we'll see how things pan out.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to bring up real quick before we wrap this up?
I'm really excited to see in like 2-3 months if our opinions changed. If in 2 or 3 weeks, if they all of a sudden say, Yeah, just change your covenant. You can have all of them. You can do all of them. You can just pick your soul binds willy nilly. Like, imagine if that stuff happens. That could make all of our predictions, all of our retrospective, 100% different. And so, I'm excited that the expansion's coming out. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. And as a final statement, at least for how I predict the start of the expansion is going to go, I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's better.
Oh, doubly for me.
Yeah, I got nothing. Oh, I guess I do have something. If you're in Psy, stop asking me what you should play. Figure it out. The answer I'm going to tell you is either Ret Paladin, Mage, or Warlock. That's it. Ret Paladin is currently looking like it's going to be the best melee as far as what you're going to bring to the comp. Mage is always good damage. And Warlock's dope as hell anyways, and always useful. So.
Hunter looks really strong in terms of carrying mechanics in the first raid.
If you're okay with switching between the 3 specs, if you want to play survival only, and you're just not willing to go marksman or BM, if survival sucks, you're not going to get a raid spot. Well, assuming you're equal with the Ret Paladin, I'm going to give the raid spot to the Ret Paladin because he's going to bring more to the raid. If you can beat that Ret Paladin, cool, it's your spot. But if you're not willing to play the ranged version, sorry, bro.
All right. If you guys are watching this on YouTube or listening to it on Anchor or Spotify, you can find us live on Friday nights at 7 p.m. PST on Twitch at twitch.tv/dsmeeps. Or if you want to watch it later, you can find us on YouTube every week on the Simply WoW podcast channel. And for audio only, you can find us on Anchor or Spotify. Have a good night and keep it simple.
See you guys.